It is 6 p.m. and I will call this meeting of the Luneburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And with that, I'd look for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Any additions or deletions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. That takes us on to the meeting minutes of April 26th. I will look for a motion to approve those as circulated. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Halverson, I assume in favor. Yeah, the motion is carried. All right, we have a public hearing tonight regarding our proposed new street encroachment bylaw. So I will turn it over to the Assistant Clerk to lay out the etiquette and then to the Acting Planning Director for his report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Etiquette for a public hearing is our Acting Planning Director will make a presentation first on the proposed bylaw. Then council will be able to ask questions, and when the mayor opens the floor for public comments, you can raise your hand and come and speak at the microphone over here. Just wait for the mayor to call on you, and we want to make sure we keep some decorum, and thank you all very much for participating. It's good to see some folks here tonight.
And we ask that people note their name and address prior to beginning to speak. All right, so we'll turn the floor over to the Acting Planning Director for his report on the proposed street encroachment bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. I provided a PowerPoint presentation for council this evening. And this is a public hearing to receive public comments on a proposed street encroachment bylaw. Council passed. If we go on to the next slide, Heather, if we may. The first reading of council was on April 12th. The first advertisement was on April 20th. We did a second advertisement on April 27th. And tonight, May 10th, we're holding a public hearing on the proposed new bylaw. Next page, Heather. The intent of the new street encroachment bylaw is to streamline the application and an administration process, provide for the ability to enable barrier-free ramp access to buildings, provide for the ability to erect sidewalk cafes, sidewalk sale areas, street furniture, and landscape features, provide for the ability to create pedestrian bypass walkways over existing on-street parking areas, as well as provide the use of 100% of the sidewalk area for properties along the south side of Blue Nose Drive between Rum Row and the end of Blue Nose Drive to the east. Next slide, Heather, if you may. So the first item is to provide the ability to enable barrier-free ramp access to buildings. This is to address new building code requirements for change in use applications. It also addresses new eating establishment license requirements for barrier-free access. It addresses the needs of the Accessibility Act and the joint Luneburg County Accessibility Plan. It addresses the provincial goal of being accessible by 2030. And it also addresses the comprehensive community plan, policies, and other actions to improve accessibility throughout the town. The next item was provide the ability to erect sidewalk cafes, sidewalk sale areas, street furniture, and landscaping features. These provisions were part of our land use bylaw, but they were not carried forward into the new land use bylaw back in September of 2021. These items are intended to be addressed under the proposed street encroachment bylaw. Many of the councillors might remember when Upland did the plan that it was, and I agree with them, not really appropriate to have those vending provisions as part of a land use bylaw, but under a separate bylaw, similar to this street encroachment bylaw. The next item was to provide the ability to create pedestrian bypass walkways over existing on-street parking areas. This provides the ability to use on-street parking areas for pedestrian routes where sidewalks do not provide sufficient width for the encroachment and the pedestrian pathway of 1.2 meters. The maximum length of 4 on-street parking spaces per bypass with a separation distance between bypasses of 200 feet. So the intent there is to limit the size of the actual pedestrian bypass as well as provide distance between each pedestrian bypass. The fourth item under the bylaw provides for the use of 100% of the sidewalk area for properties along the south side of Blue Nose Drive between Rum Row and the end of Blue Nose Drive to the east. And this is to accommodate a development down on Blue Nose Drive known as the Smoke Pit Barbecue, where there's just really tight, narrow streets down at that end of this Blue Nose Drive. So that's the end of my presentation to council and for the public hearing. I'll turn it back over to the mayor for further comments.
Thank you, Arthur. Are there any questions at this stage of council? Councillor Halverson.
We should really revamp our agenda, just to first question. Through the chair to Arthur, the maximum length for on-street parking spaces with 200 feet between bypasses. I'm looking at that. I'm just thinking about the number of businesses on Lincoln who may want to take advantage of this. It seems like we make it in a situation where, you know, one business may end up getting preferential treatment over another one. Basically, kind of like whoever asks first may win on this one. What consideration have we given to that concern?
The bylaw does, through the chair, to your worship, the bylaw does provide the ability for 2 or more to actually share the frontage upon their street. Typically, based on the old Luneburg plan, the frontage along a lot of our lots is 40 feet. So basically that's 2 parking stalls. So the thinking was to allow 4 with 80 feet of frontage so the 2 stores could actually get together and sign an encroachment license and an indemnity agreement to share in that route, if you catch my drift. Yeah, but it would have to be first come, first serve. But I'm open to different possibilities with regards to, you know, hopefully they'll cost share and notify their neighbors of what their plans are doing with regards to the encroachment coming out into the street for pedestrian bypass.
Okay, any further questions of council at this stage? Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Your Worship. Through to Arthur. So just on that same theme, Arthur, does the bylaw give any consideration to the use then, you know, and to how it would be granted? Like, you know, who would have a priority, a restaurant versus a clothing store, or, you know, something like that? Is there any provisions in there, or is it still just basically first come, first serve?
There is no provision within the bylaw that would separate or give advantages for certain uses over other certain uses.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the public portion of the public hearing. Heather, if you could just start the clock, just so we have people are aware that they would have 10 minutes to speak specifically on the street encroachment bylaw proposal. And we'll open it up to the floor if anybody would like to come to the mic and speak to the street encroachment. Yep, right there in the mic.
Hello, good evening.
My name is Shane Pittman. I owner of Ocean Gear and Smoke Pit Barbecue. The term of sidewalk in front of, the properties on the north side of Blue Nose Drive, it's not really a sidewalk there. It's more of a more parking and then a dirt path. What I did with the smoke pit is basically fill in the dirt path to, just to kind of make it a little better instead of a bunch of mud. I've done that, but at the same time too, on the average given day at Ocean Gear, we offload 10 to 12 trucks. We're talking tractor trailers, whatnot. We can only move to we can only offload somewhat in that parking area there with forklifts, and equipment like that. Part of the reason is why I put the rope up the way I did was to somewhat stop the pedestrian traffic from going through down there. It's been an issue. We've had a lot of close calls over the last 20 years. We've also, just when we load the scallop brakes up, they're 4 ton. We've been driving up towards the truck. People have actually literally 10 feet away from the truck as we're driving ahead, looked up, took a picture, went underneath it as we're driving forward and take pictures. You got a hydraulic line could break, anything could happen, that could drop very quickly. It's very dangerous. So what I, is trying to get the pedestrian traffic away from Blue Nose Drive, or from just that particular area. Now, there is a sidewalk on the south end. I believe, there should be a crosswalk, and I brought this up to Development Nova Scotia, when they were doing this record building and speaking with you guys, is that there should be a crosswalk there for the public dock, this Wicker Wharf, to cross the street as they come down from the museum, a crosswalk to the sidewalk on the south side of it. We do, like I said, we have a lot of truck traffic, quite a bit of truck traffic, and also, there's close to 40 employees coming and going, plus other subcontractors, some refits. We could have, 24 subcontractors coming in and out every day. So the sidewalk area down there is kind of confusing for me a little bit to run another one, but as there as a working waterfront as well. It's not necessarily for the smoke pit. It was just kind of something to pretty it up. We thought, well, hey, let's put some chairs out front and just a little bit more seating and do that. But basically, yes, that's where the other thing down that area, which I've noticed, is that they're going to walk down the middle of the street anyways. Our experience is a lot of people don't use the sidewalk. Everybody comments on it. They go where they want. We see it all around town. It's part of being in Luneburg during the summer, but it is what it is. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shane. And Shane, we'll just follow up with your address and stuff. I'm sure we've got your contact for the record. Yeah, no worry. Arthur, I'm sure he does. Anyone else like to speak on the street encroachment bylaw? Amy? Just a reminder, your name and address before you start.
Amy Funk, 103 Pelham Street. So I guess, I didn't really hear in the proposal, when you say first come, first serve, how many people get to do it at a time? Is there something stopping everybody from doing it?
Through your worship, this bylaw is for abutting property owners only. So it's their frontage that's on the sidewalk or on the street. So it will be the stores that actually have the frontage on the street that can apply for a street encroachment permit. It's not anybody else that can apply for the frontage in front of your store. Only the store can.
So how many properties have that in Luneburg? Like dozens?
As many as are
Right,
are abutting the street
right.
or the sidewalk, yeah.
So could all of those people potentially get one all at once? And because it just seems like it would eliminate a lot of parking spaces.
Well, I was concerned if everybody applied at the same time. That's why I wanted to put that separation distance of 200 feet to ensure that there's gaps so that people can actually go back and use the sidewalk. The main intent of the sidewalk is for pedestrian traffic. It's not to have that traffic go out within the roadway of where vernacular traffic goes. So that was a concern. Most of our encroachments, I would say like 80% of them are on the existing sidewalk. This will only apply where the sidewalk is too narrow to provide that 1.2 meter separation for accessibility, basically for people in wheelchair to be able to still use the sidewalk and get around these encroachment areas. So,
And sorry, one last question. Is there a length of time that they're, like, would it be like a yearly thing or a seasonal thing or a monthly thing that they would apply to do this for?
I believe they're good for 10 years. So whenever a person applies for an encroachment, they're good for up to 10 years from the date of signing of the encroachment license.
Thank you, Amy. Anyone else like to come speak on this? Going once? Going twice? All right, so with that, I'll look for a motion just to close the public hearing. Prior to moving to second reading, moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Duggan. All those in favor? Opposed? The public hearing is now closed. All right, that takes us on to correspondence, petitions, and proclamations consideration. We've received the 12-month notice from the Department of Municipal Affairs. I'd just turn it over to the CAO if there's anything he'd like to highlight. Or the finance director. Because this usually is about money.
There are a few things in there about money, your worship. So as stated in the letter, it's under the MGA, the Minister of Municipal Affairs is to provide the NSFM a 12-month notice of any actions that could have an effect on the municipal revenues or expenses. So this letter covers 23-24. There are a few items that it contains that we've been aware of already. I guess of particular interest is the renegotiation of the memorandum of understanding for municipalities and the municipal financial capacity grant. That grant had been doubled last year. It indicates from my understanding of the letter that it won't be doubled this year, but I have reached out just to confirm that with the province. I think the other one maybe of note is just that it confirms the RCMP percentage increase for the year at 11%, just 11.04% actually. And so that we had some additional monies in there in our budget so that there will be some transfers that we could do to reserve with that. There's a note about additional coverage for firefighters and that there's no additional cost until after 25-26 for municipalities for those. So those are a couple items that I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to answer questions if there's other from council.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions from council at this stage? I just have one, Lisa, or Councillor Halverson, was that a question? No, I have one, Lisa. So the 11% is on the go forward basis. And then we're still unsure about the retroactive component.
There is still some uncertainty around that, your worship.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the money that you would be transferring to reserves, I imagine you'd be just putting in a general operating reserve in case it had to be put toward. Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah. I just didn't want to make sure we were allocating it for something else before we knew what was coming there. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions of council? Seeing none. That takes us on to a proclamation request from the VON for VON week, which they've done in the past, and it's all laid out there. If it's anybody's pleasure to move that draft motion as presented, moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any questions, discussion, or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. Takes us on to unfinished business, and the first item is the proposed street encroachment bylaw. I think Arthur's presentation is done well, so if we can just have a motion to approve that as circulated, the draft motion moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Is there any discussion or debate? Councillor Halverson?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on Amy's question about the duration of the permit. 10 years seems like a long time. This seems to be, this seems to solve almost a seasonal problem, you know, if you're gonna have a street sale or, and again, you don't know what the condition, geez, will that business even be in existence for 10 years? What's the streetscape gonna look like year past year? I just feel like perhaps 10 years might be too long. We should look at, maybe this should be a 12-month permit as opposed to, you know, again, I understand that this means more administration for the staff and for businesses involved, but I think it makes it a more level playing field too, so that if somebody missed out the year before, perhaps they'd have an opportunity, you know, to get their business in line and take advantage of this.
Leave it to the acting planning director to respond.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this is just to enable those property owners with commercial frontage on the streets. So they're the only applicant. And similar as the land use bylaw was with regards with small cafes and chairs and tables, they received a development permit. It was good forever. There was no restrictions. The encroachment bylaw was specifically written to do steps and stairs and existing encroachments on the street right away. Those encroachments are for 10 years. So that was just rolled over into this bylaw as part of the drafting of the original bylaw. So it's there for 10 years. I don't see any issues with regards to first come, first serve, because the frontage of your property is the frontage of your property. It's no one else's. So only one person can apply for that space. So I don't really see the concern.
Well, through the chair again, I think my concern is, I understand, I appreciate what you're saying, Arthur, about, you know, the intent of this was to provide 10 years access for mobility in order to meet the standard. That makes perfect sense to, you know, for that intent, it makes perfect sense to have it for 10 years. But where we're looking at, you know, when I'm looking at what's proposed here, we're talking about allowing encroachment for things like sales racks and things like that. That's a very different intent than providing, you know, people access to a business. That business could change hands. The neighbors, a different neighbor could come in and want access that maybe would be beneficial to them at some point. You know, we don't know how the streetscape is going to change, and I just feel like if we offer a 10-year encroachment to an address, we might be setting ourselves up for problems in the future. I just think the duration is too long. I think for maybe what we could look at is perhaps setting, I hate doing this on the fly, but anyway, perhaps what we could look at is, to your point, Arthur, you know, anything that's accessibility issues, obviously a 10-year encroachment makes perfect sense. If we're looking for anything other than that, if we're looking at something that's, you know, retail-based, sales-based, cafe, you know, any business purpose aside from accessibility, perhaps that should be a 12-month basis and something that opens it up so that it can be refreshed if the need arises. I don't know, what does that present too much of an administration problem here for you or for staff?
First off, through the chair, I think that's a huge administration issue. There's probably currently with our staff, that'll be almost impossible to do. Second, I just wanted to make a point that the encroachment license itself is transferable. If there's a new owner or someone purchases that property, then they have 120 days to come in and transfer that existing encroachment license from the old owner into the new owner's name with no charge, because it's just a transference of the existing encroachment license. At the end of the 10 years, then it has to be renewed. So that's how the existing bylaw is written. And again, like development permit wise, which is how we've done it for 25 years, as far back as I know. The cafe portion and retail sales on the sidewalk we're issued a development permit. That's a one-time thing. And as long as that store sits there and operates, it doesn't get renewed. There's no time limit with regards to development permits, as long as it's inactive and acted upon. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, any further discussion or debate on this? Councillor Halverson.
Just a follow-up. Do we have any sense, you kind of touched on this earlier, Arthur, of how many properties would actually be impacted by this change? You mentioned there's only so many properties that are even get captured under this encroachment. Do we know how many that would be? Are we talking 10 properties, 20, 30?
Through your worship again, are you talking about how many businesses can take advantage of this bylaw or use?
Yes, yeah.
Will be as many commercial properties there are in town. I would estimate close to 250 to 300.
Sorry, but you mentioned there was, again, through the chair, that there was the distance on the sidewalk, it was 1.6 meters. Is that what you said?
1.2
1 point.
to provide that pedestrian
Right.
pathway on the existing sidewalk.
Right. So how many, that's the number I'm trying to get to, is how many businesses are we talking about that if they wanted this encroachment, they wouldn't have the 1.2, that they would have to?
Yeah, we don't have that information.
Okay, Councillor Sanford.
Through the chair to Arthur, is there any way that we can separate the accessibility aspects of this particular piece from the other aspects that provide sales or service?
Sure, through the other sections of the bylaw for encroachment upon the streets, as well as the pedestrian bypass, we can add a section in those parts of the bylaw that only apply to those and say that it's only for one calendar year or season. So we could do that.
So just looking around, if somebody would like to make an amendment to that effect, the only thing I would say is, Arthur, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if this is amended at this stage, we'd have to go back to public hearing, correct?
That would be correct if council considers it a substantial change.
Okay, non-substantial changes were okay?
Yes, we'll be able to, what I would like to do with council's permission is redraft it, bring it back to council for final motion or final approval, and not have to go back to re-advertise the public hearing. Because I feel right now, if that's the only amendment that you're doing.
That's not substantive.
Correct.
So we'll move to defer this until our next meeting with Arthur making some non-substantive changes based on council comment. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sanford. Any discussion or debate on that procedural motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried with the deputy mayor and myself voting in the negative. Okay, that takes us on to, so that'll be deferred until our next meeting with a revised proposal with non-substantive edits. That takes us on to the lunch truck proposal with a staff report and recommendations. I will give it to the acting planning director to present that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. During a council meeting of April 12th, council passed the following motion. It was moved and seconded to direct staff to prepare a report concerning mobile vending items raised in Shore Lunch Food Trucks presentation. Amy Funk made a presentation to council on April 12th, and she had basically two requests. Permission to use 87 Victoria Road. The blue building is located as a location to place and operate a lunch truck, and to have council undertake an amendment to the land use bylaws, Schedule G, vending to expand the list of permitted mobile canteen use zones to include the general commercial use zone, the waterfront use zone, and the park and recreation use zone, and for council to cover the associated advertisement fees and amendment application fees. So with regards to request number one, 87 Victoria Road, the blue building, is located in the commercial mixed use zone that enables the establishment of mobile canteen operations pursuant to Schedule G of the land use bylaw. No amendment to the land use bylaw is required in order to enable lunch truck to operate in the commercial mixed use zone. As the property is owned by the town permission is necessary. Amy wishes to establish a lunch truck at this location on Thursday and Friday, twice a week. A lease agreement is required to lease the lands at 87 Victoria Road from the town, as the town is the owner of the property. Leases for 1 year or less can be executed by the CAO. I also like to point out to council members that we just received late a letter from the Luneburg Farmers Market Association providing support for the lunch truck to be located at the town's blue building. The second request is with regards to an amendment to the land use bylaw to add the general commercial use zone, the waterfront use zone, and the park and recreational use zone to the list of permitted vending use zones, as well as waive the advertising fees and amendment application fees. The amendment to the town's land use bylaw will be undertaken in a separate report. Note that the amendment process takes roughly 5 to 6 months and requires input from the Planning Advisory Committee, a public information meeting, first reading, a public hearing, as well as second reading and council approval. Provided a chart of the amendment, land use bylaw amendment process in the report. The following 3 motions are recommended, and they're outlined in your report. One is to approve a lease agreement for the 2022 season from May 1st to October 31st for food trucks on town lands within the appropriate zoning regulations at a rate of $100 per person per number of days per week. So for an example, Amy wishes to establish 2 days per week, so that would be $200 for the season. Second motion is to further develop a policy to handle similar requests for the town for the use of town-owned lands related to food truck vending. And the third motion is to undertake the planning report in order to consider the amendments to the land use bylaw, in particular Schedule G, to enable the establishment of mobile canteens, again, in the general commercial use zone, the waterfront use zone, and the park and recreation use zone. So that is my report for council's consideration.
Thank you, Arthur. Are there any questions of Arthur at this stage? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess we could, it's more along the line of not so much a question, but so much along the line as the motion that's presented. Would probably be a good idea to do each motion separately, Your Worship. I think that's.
I was on that same vein. I have a
Okay.
number of questions I want to ask before we get to the motion.
Yeah, so well, I'd be happy to move the first motion, and then we can have the discussion on it. And then
Okay,
I'll have-
can I ask my questions first?
Oh,
Just so-
certainly, yeah.
Because they're related to, like, I want to get a sense of the fullness of this, and it relates to some of the motions and how they interact. Does anybody else have any questions before I go? Councillor Duggan? No? Okay. Arthur, per what you mentioned, like for me, the bigger issue here is the overall approach we take in Luneburg to regulate vending. And I believe you mentioned earlier that it's not customary to have this as part of your land use bylaw, like normally you would have a separate vending bylaw, correct? So with respect to your third motion, I wonder if there's an opportunity to move to that kind of approach. I don't see why it's in our land use bylaws either. So the first thing is a separate bylaw. The second thing is if we're moving to a separate bylaw, I wonder if you think we should consider the license fee. Like you don't get the license fees for town are quite low across the board. And I think we need to address that so that vending businesses are comparable to a commercial tax rate. And I just wanted to get your view on that. And then I'll ask my other ones later.
I guess with your second question with regards to the vending cost for the vending permit itself, maybe the finance director can weigh in a little bit on that one for me, because that was an establishment of at the town vending through the town's vending bylaw.
Yeah.
The cost was $546 for vending license, and it's approved by council yearly through the budget.
Yeah. And I'm
process.
sure it'd be fine for this year, but I'm just saying in future years, I think our license fees overall, we tend to charge quite a lower rate for those businesses that are not operating in a fixed structure, paying a commercial tax rate. So I just wanted you to speak to the level playing field aspect of that, if you could.
Sure, yeah, I mean, certainly that could be something that we undertake a review if that's what we're looking at as a more wholesome item. I guess when we were working on this as collaborating as staff, we were thinking, what could we do to enable it for this year? And that's why we were recommending like a fuller policy review for future years.
No, I understand that. And the aspect of allowing vending on town-owned properties also makes perfect sense to me. Two last questions. One, just because these wind up being headaches, if we moved forward with a new vending bylaw or a revised aspect under the land use bylaw, would we pursue a summary offense authority to find those people who are vending without a license?
I don't know that I could speak to that this evening, Your Worship, but you know, that could be something we consider, certainly.
As much a question as a suggestion, or a suggestion as a question rather. And secondly, in terms of allowing them in parks, lastly, in terms of allowing them in parks, would we, is there some way to establish that would be peripheral? Like I'm not against having them in park zones, but if we allow it in park zones, is there not like, would people then have the opportunity to trudge all over our parks and leave waste and cause headaches for public works and our parks management staff?
That would be all part of the planning report and the review through the planning process of one of my main concerns about that is, you know, traffic control and safety of pedestrians and safety of vehicles as they pull off the road and park and place their order and then hop in their cars, you know, especially kids running in between cars. So one of my concerns is safety. With regards to the operation of the actual vending, usually there's a requirement for them to keep their place clean at all times and provide the proper garbage and recycling containers on site.
Okay, yeah, I'm just not looking to trade one problem for another, that's all. So those are all my questions. If anybody else has any questions? All right, so we will take then, if it is anybody's pleasure to move the first motion as circulated. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Is there any discussion or debate on that motion? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I guess my concern with this motion is the fee that we're charging for a food truck. It's one thing to have a vending machine, you know, a pop machine or, you know, something like that, you know, I think it's confusing with vending versus a food truck. So I am 100% in favor of support of food trucks. However, I'm also have to be conscious of, operators of brick and mortar facilities that sell food as well. So I just think it has to be somewhere more in line than $100 per day per season, because the maximum you'd pay would be $700. And maybe Lisa, you can help me out here.
No, I understand what you're asking, Deputy Mayor. I guess the vending permit is an established rate that we have at this point. The lease, council could have some flexibility on that. That was based on some other property leases that we had for mobile type businesses, perhaps down on the Luneburg Drive, those sort of things. And so that's what staff used as a base to try to come up with that. But if council wanted to suggest a different amount, that there's no, like, it's not like we have to change a bylaw or do anything particular to do that.
So that's not in the motion. So that was like what, 500 and 750, what was?
The vending permit is the $546.
Yes.
And then there's the because that's already established, right?
Okay.
And so I guess the motion is the essentially the license to have that parking spot for those Thursdays and Fridays
So
during this
yeah.
tourist season.
So how do we build an equitable amount of money there that would reflect the business that they're running? I guess that's been my question before I'd vote in favor of this, of the motion.
Right. I guess we could look at an average of commercial taxes and the square footages of those in those same planning zones that these food trucks would be allowed, and then determine based on the area of the spot, perhaps, to come up with something, but that would take a bit of work to do, but yeah.
And the CEO looking to weigh in?
It was an interesting conversation as we tried to determine what an appropriate fee structure would look like. And given that we had no history, we had to use what existing lease agreements we had as well as consideration of the space and the location and so on. The only other thing that we spent a fair amount of time talking about was these are mobile, right? So if you charge a significant amount of money, and I own a mobile canteen, while in Bridgewater is free, for example, I will go to Bridgewater, right? So I guess we're trying to balance two things. We're trying to recognize the investment that a commercial entity has made within the town limits and trying to provide a framework for a mobile entity to come in and utilize it in a competitive manner. So if you're comparing on a commercial basis, your analogy is 100% right for two fixed entities. When you're looking at a mobile entity, you also have to look at the other options that individual has available to them. So it's a combination of the two, I would say.
Thank you, CEO. Only counter argument I'd offer is that we generate a lot more tourism traffic than some of our neighboring municipalities, which does, affect how many people or what incentive they would have to come here.
And this is exactly why we decided that we need a policy discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very difficult for staff to walk away and take into consideration all these
And it's
different
arbitrary.
scenarios and come up with a definitive amount and say this is the right amount.
Yeah.
So the policy debate will be more fulsome and take into consideration the different scenarios.
Councilor Robinson, do I have you on the?
Yes, no, I remember at some point, this is basically, we're almost looking at that as a trial. Am I wrong in that? Or are we actually going to put this in? I mean, I know we're writing this to policy at this point, but this is the first application we've had of this nature. Is it not? Right. So we're testing the waters here, and we can revisit this again whenever we choose.
Well, I think what we do is the particular lease proposal for this year is a trial and a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the staff recommendation, there's two subsequent motions, basically to redo the vending bylaw and to provide a policy that relates to the vending on town property.
Right.
So I think our overall policy approach would be dictated through those processes.
Well, and this is kind of where I'm going with this, is that I feel like for this year, staff has come up with a number. I mean, maybe it doesn't reflect comparable commercial rates, but again, this is not a comparable commercial business. It is its own entity. We're testing the waters on this. I think it behooves us to maybe move forward, and then we'll have some data when we see how this runs for the year. Staff will have more information in order to make an informed decision over the next several months. And then when they come forward with a policy, they'll have some data from Luneburg, in conjunction with anything else they come up with to better inform the bylaw.
Okay. Any further discussion or debate on this one? So it has been moved and seconded at the rates that were listed in the draft report. If there's no further discussion or debate, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? The first motion, opposed, motion is carried. That takes us on to the second item, which is drafting a policy related to the vending on town property. It's anyone's pleasure to move that as circulated. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councilor Birtles. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. And finally, to undertake a planning report related to the vending bylaw. There is a motion that's drafted there. Moved by Councilor Birtles, seconded by the deputy mayor. Any comments, questions, debate? So I have Councilor Duggan and then the deputy mayor and then myself.
So just in reading this, we would be amending the land use bylaw and not creating a separate bylaw. Is that what the motion says?
Yes,
Okay. So it doesn't have to stay under the land use bylaw, though. We could create a completely separate vending bylaw that is a standalone that has nothing to do with the land use bylaw. Is that correct?
correct. The vending section under our land use bylaws, Schedule G. So council could just delete Schedule G completely from the land use bylaw, take those provisions and incorporate them within a new revised vending bylaw.
Okay.
So procedurally, Arthur, we would still have to amend the land use bylaw to repeal those specific sections. We would just do that in conjunction with passing a land use vending bylaw, a separate vending bylaw.
Yes.
Yes.
The only thing I'm unsure of is if council wishes somehow to regulate where these mobile canteens can be located, then you have to reference the location somehow. Whether the vending bylaw relates back to the land use bylaw with regards to use zones, or you specifically do a separate map as part of your vending bylaw, you could do that, just outlining vending within these areas only, and it stays as part of the vending bylaw.
Yeah,
So that is a
so
possibility, but the intent of that's currently in our Schedule G for mobile canteens, the intent was to limit mobile canteens to the commercial mixed zone.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So somehow, either through a map under the new vending bylaw or referencing the land use bylaw, I prefer actually a new map under the vending bylaw, and then it can be a self-sustained bylaw in itself, outlining the areas where council wishes to have these vending activities.
yeah, so I think
sorry.
if I just want to say, I think council, I just want to test for consensus here that council's preferences, Arthur, yes, that you do a planning report, but not that you be so prescribed in what that would entail. So we would look for a planning report to either have a separate land use, a separate vending bylaw, or to amend the vending bylaw, or whatever approach staff thought was best to regulate vending in the town of Luneburg. And is that correct? I'm getting the sense that council's there. I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. Can we take that as an amendment by unanimous consent? And is that clear to staff what that direction entails? Okay. Sorry, Councilor Duggan, if you can, does that answer Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. When reading through the report, it states that, I mean, someone has to make this request for a change, correct? Is that not correct? And there's a cost associated with that as well?
Typically, I outline in the report, like if anybody wanted to make an amendment to the land use bylaw, then they'll be subject to the $1,450 application fee, which covers $750 for an application fee and $700 towards a deposit on the costs of the advertisements necessary for the public information session and the public hearing.
So this process, are we incurring those costs?
Yes, but if we take the vending bylaw route, then usually we don't receive applications from the public with regards to a new vending bylaw.
Okay.
All I can speak for now is the land use bylaw charges those fees. I wouldn't know if we have a fee schedule for other bylaws.
I guess my point, is this being provoked by a request, right? I mean, we're just, staff isn't bringing this to us that they see an error in our bylaws that needs to be corrected. And I do feel that the cost should be, someone should bear that cost who needs that, who's requesting that.
Counselor Halverson. And then Counselor Sanford.
I think I may have stealing Councilor Stanford's thunder here again, but I, to the deputy mayor's point, this is, obviously something's been pointed out that we've missed in our bylaw. I don't necessarily feel like someone's asking for special treatment. I feel like someone has pointed out, okay, here's a business opportunity in town that we haven't accounted for. It's something that's been overlooked. So I don't feel that it's a special request from the public. I do feel like this is something that we as a council, as a staff should address. So as far as, fee structure, I don't feel like it's fair to, insist that the applicant incur, $1,450 cost to fix a problem that we missed.
Counselor Sanford.
I'd agree with Counselor Halverson, but that wasn't my question. All of this is relatively new for me. So I'm sitting here trying to understand. So I'm hoping that someone can help me to understand. When we talk about mobile canteens and we're thinking about food service, I'm thinking about what is the difference between mobile services, whether it's a service or whether it's a product, a goods or services. Is there a difference? Do we look at those differently? Or do we consider those in the same vein if they're a mobile service? Am I making sense? You look confused.
No, I think you're making sense. What if somebody wanted to drive in a truck and sell T-shirts as opposed to food? Yeah,
Exactly. So is there any difference in how we approach that as we would in an approach to mobile canteen, food service, food truck? What's the difference?
Through your worship, mobile canteen has a definition. And I believe it's related strictly to food and drinks. Vending on its own can be vending of any sale products. So I'm a little bit confused on your question because Schedule G of the land use bylaw deals with both. It may not be a mobile canteen or a lunch truck. Could be someone selling T-shirts out of the back of a roll-up truck and you just pull up, or it could be a table, could be stands.
So I guess
Could be.
I'm trying to understand. So I think of services on Blue Nose Drive that are being sold that are mobile services. So when we look at this as something completely new, is it as new as what we think it is? I guess is my question. So let's use as an example, Seaweed Tours, okay? So they're parked down on Blue Nose Drive, they're selling a service, right? So I would see this lunch truck selling a product. So that's, I'm asking, is there a difference in how we handle products or services? Is it really that big of a deal? I guess is what I'm asking.
So I would say the issue, correct me if I'm wrong here, Arthur, that we're grappling with at the moment is that in most municipalities, you would have a separate vending bylaw that would regulate this and it wouldn't be part of your land use bylaw, correct?
Correct. Yes.
But for the town of Lunenburg, for reasons that at least I'm not aware of, it's contained within the land use bylaw and we don't have a separate vending bylaw.
No, we do have a separate vending bylaw.
So we're looking then potentially to amend that bylaw, or that your report would consider one of the options being to repeal the sections of the bylaw that talk about vending within land use and strictly have those regulated as part of a vending bylaw.
That is an option.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the only motion that's been moved and seconded so far is to get a report. Is everybody, does that exhaust all the questions? Deputy Mayor?
Well, it seems like we're chasing something here and we don't even have a request. So I guess that's, what I keep coming back to. If someone gives us a formal request, then maybe, because it's going to create a lot of work for staff. It's going to, and it's taken a lot of discussion here tonight and we don't even know what we're discussing. Susan asked some good questions, right? So, and I am still, a stickler for consistency in fees. We've had situations before where, citizens have been caught in the nuances of land uses that have not fitted their needs. And, we've charged them when they've come to us and asked them to have that changed. So I'm also a stickler for consistency. So the council consider that as well.
Yeah, and the fees aren't related to the motion that's on the floor at this time. Correct.
If I may, Your Worship, I believe we have received a request to amend the land use bylaw to enable those 3 additional zone areas as part of Amy's presentation to council on the 12th of April. So, right, but she asked that those fees be waived because she feels there'll be many people behind her that will take advantage of the same proposed amendment, but that's up to council to consider.
So there's no motion unless somebody would like to make one to waive any fees related to any application. And the only motion in front of council right now is to get a report from staff related to vending regulation. So does anybody want to move that? So Arthur, why is there no draft motion related to the request to waive fees?
That may have been overlooked by myself.
Okay. So if anybody would like to make a motion to waive the fees related to this application, however it gets disposed of, that motion can be entertained at this stage. All right, seeing no one, the fees won't be waived.
Counselor Ernst has his hand up.
Oh, Counselor Ernst, sorry.
Yes, I would like to make that motion.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Counselor Duggan? Is there any discussion or debate? All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, Counselor Ernst, were you in favor? Okay, so the motion to waive fees is carried. That returns us to the motion related to getting a staff report. Is there any further discussion or debate on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, that takes us on to committee meeting minutes, reports, recommendations and notices of motion. The project steering team meetings from April the 20th are there. There are no motions related to those. The Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes are there, and there is a motion related to those in terms of the Heritage Recognition Awards for 2022. I believe Councillor Sanford is declaring a conflict on that item, given that her residence is one of the nominees. So you would sit in the gallery, Councillor Sanford, yeah. You're not as used to it as Jenny is. Okay, so we'll note that Councillor Sanford has declared a conflict for the minutes. I will entertain a motion to move that the nominees listed be presented with Heritage Recognition Awards for 2022. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halverson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is, we can record you as voting in favor. Councillor Duggan, yes. The motion is carried. Councillor Sanford, you may now return to the table. That takes us on to new business. There is a Luneburg Arts Fest, July 16th and 17th, 2022, special event permit application. There is a motion as provided. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that as circulated? Moved by Councillor Bertels, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Likewise for the Golden Retriever Gathering and Walk, July 23rd, 2022, special event permit. There's a draft motion as provided, moved by Councillor Bertels, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any discussion or debate on that? Questions? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ernst.
I said aye.
I thought
I couldn't tell if you could see me, so I thought I'd just vocalize it.
Yeah, so we'll if you're strongly voting in the negative on something, let me know.
Okay.
Because that'll get recorded. That takes us on to the proposed appointment of building officials pursuant to the Nova Scotia Building Code Act. There is a list there with respect to our inspection services agreement. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that as presented? Moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, there is also a late community grants, late application from the Royal Canadian Legion. There is a staff report and recommendation, and we will note that Councillor Sanford is also declaring a conflict on this item. There is a draft motion as circulated. If it is anybody's pleasure to move it, and staff are here to speak to the application. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertels. And I'd also note that there was explanation in the staff report as to why this application was late. Is there any discussion or debate or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. The diesel fuel tank at the armories, there is a motion that a phase 2 environmental site assessment be completed there. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that motion as circulated? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Is there any questions, discussion, debate on that? Councillor Sanford.
Can somebody help me to understand how it is that we had the work done previously, but that inspection didn't happen at that time? Like I asked a question because I would hate to see us make a similar error in the future as we go forward.
So unfortunately, Councillor Sanford, at the time when the work was being carried out, staff didn't realize that they should have checked in with the insurer and seen what kind of requirements that they would need. We were with a different insurer at the time. But I have heard from staff that were on site that they didn't believe that there was any environmental issues or any leaks. Unfortunately, when you're changing insurers, often they ask for documentation of certain things, and where that tank had been changed quite recently, they were looking for that kind of paperwork to support that. We did the phase 1. It was inconclusive, and so that's why they're requesting the additional assessment. I guess the one thing to point out with that additional assessment that, you know, should something be found, then there will be additional cost with that remediation that would be required. But currently, right now, there's, fairly significant risk without having that insurance coverage.
Just one more question. Is it possible, like, have we shopped around for any other insurance providers?
Well, it would be difficult to have just this one component, like this is just like fuel tank component or environmental component over all of our, as you can imagine, our insurance is quite complex over our organization. But no, to this point, we haven't gone out to see about other providers, but generally they would be looking for typically the same kind of information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Any further questions? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. It takes us on to the potential sale of lands at Upper King Street. There are 5 motions related to that and a staff report, and I will turn it over to the interim planning director to see if there's anything he'd like to summarize in terms of salient points on that.
I just wanted to point out that this was before council previously, but the town is interested in investigating the possibility of divesting ownership of 4 properties as well as the possibility of the King Street right away into private ownership for private uses. A map outlining the lots is attached in your report. It is intended to initiate the process for an RFP to obtain potential development schemes for the land. The proposed RFP will consider the feasibility of creating a street network or alternatively undertake a group dwelling development. It's proposed that the RFP asks for 2 development schemes with regards to the street network, and that would be under the existing zoning of medium density residential use zone. And there's 2 development schemes for group dwelling proposals under a proposed high density residential use zone application. Staff has provided a draft of the RFP to consider the 4 different scenarios as part of the report. And the report outlines 5 motions for council's consideration as part of the report. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Arthur. Are there any questions at this stage? Seeing none, is it anybody's pleasure to move any of or all of those motions? Deputy Mayor, moving all 5, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motions are carried. There are 2 motions related to upcoming funding programs from staff. So the beautification of the streetscaping program and the provincial capital assistance program. There are staff reports provided. Is it anyone's pleasure to move those motions as presented? Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Sanford. No, not that I'm seeing. Not on my agenda. Any questions of staff on the applications related to the funding programs? I know that Councillor Sanford and I are very pleased that street trees is going in under the streetscaping and beautification item. Never miss an opportunity to talk about the importance of street trees, as you all know. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Just love to talk about street trees. Finally, in our public agenda, there is a parking request from Washington Black Productions, Canada Limited, for the use of the town parking lot at the community center from May 1st to 31st. I assume some of this is going to be retroactive in the approval for the $7,500 flat fee. Anybody like to move that? Moved by the deputy mayor. Seconded by Councillor Sanford, and the deputy mayor has a question.
So my question is, where will that 7,500 be applied? Because that would be like, unfounded revenue, right?
Right. So typically that would be for the recreational parking lot. And so that would be added to field or parking lot rental revenue at that point. If it was not, it would just become part of the general surplus or at the end of the year. It can be allocated to a particular project. I mean, when we do location fees for the films, we allocate those to parks. And if that was council's wish to do that, that could be done as well.
Well, I'm just thinking, well, I guess I got two questions. Do we have any reserve for the rebuilding or rehabilitation of that parking lot?
No, we don't. And as we know, there's been some significant budget estimates for redoing that. So that could go towards that. If that's what
Well,
council
I was
wished.
going to suggest either that or that's probably going to be a long-term capital plan anyway that we have to accrue for, but either that or the Tannery Road sidewalk. That would be my
Pardon me,
suggestion.
for
The Tannery Road sidewalk, that would be my suggestion for this particular sum of money. One or the other, I'd be fine with.
Council's
You
pleasure.
want to make it a motion?
Okay, do I amend the motion? What's council's thoughts? Where would they rather have it? Okay. All right.
I'm happy to have go over it when it goes.
Yeah.
Pull it when we need it.
Well, I do think it's important that we start accruing funds for some of these large capital projects that are nice to have. So I'd like to amend the motion that it would be accrued for the parking lot improvement there.
I'm wondering if an amendment by unanimous consent could be considered, that if I don't want to do this again, so
Sure.
any further rentals of that parking lot or other parking space be dedicated to the same, or you would not?
Well, I guess it would be, there are rentals, incidental rentals throughout the year that are actually built in the budget, $30 a year. But
Okay,
so you don't-
I'll
you don't-
drop it. I was fine with Councillor
Okay.
Halverson, but I don't want to talk about it anymore. So the motion is unanimous, now we're talking about an amendment. So the amendment is that the 7,500 be dedicated to the parking lot replacement. If and when such time, not if, but when such time comes. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. In that case, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So now we return to the main motion as amended. Any comment, Councillor Halverson?
Just a quick question on, we already rent that parking lot to the SSRCE for Blue Nose Academy staff. How many parking spaces are they actually looking to get production?
Sorry, if we can just have you two turn your mics off because you're leaving your mics on, so we can't have more than two people at once. So that's why Lisa's didn't come on.
Okay, sorry. I believe Devin is here with us this evening. He would be able to speak more about number of spots that they're looking for and those sort of things.
Okay, I will turn the floor over to Devin, who joins us virtually.
Yes, my understanding it's going to fluctuate anywhere between 50 and 100. And I know they have proactively reached out to the school, and Kelly Cunningham, the recreation director, has been facilitating and coordinating as well. So far, there are no issues with the arrangements. As you did mention, Mr. Mayor, this is a retroactive proposal here. They have been parking there since the start of the production. So yeah, it's a fluctuating situation, 50 to 100, depending on the number of background they have on set.
All right, Councillor Halverson, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, my real concern was Thursday mornings when that fills up for the market and the school and with production with trucks and things. But if it's working now, then it's going to continue to work. So great.
Yeah, in 9 days, we've certainly hit a Thursday. Councillor Duggan?
I think my bigger concern was after school pickup, which at that point, if you're picking your child up by driving, you have to use that parking lot to park and then walk to the front of the school. And I've already noticed, I don't know how much space they're taking up at this point, but people are just having to park anywhere. It's a dangerous situation with kids coming back into that parking lot. So that would be a concern for me. In terms of them using 50 to 100 spots, I mean, that's how many parents are coming back there. This isn't outside of school time. This is during the school year. It is causing a backlog of people trying to access that parking lot. So I don't know what the solution to that is, but it is an issue for sure.
Okay, I think staff will take that under advisement. There is a motion as amended. Any further discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Some of those were, let's try that one again because some of those were on the edge. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, now I need a motion to moved and seconded to meet in camera pursuant to the listed items under section 22(2) of the Municipal Government Act. Can I get a motion to that effect? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried, and with council's consent, we will take a 10-minute recess and reconvene.